welcome once again to another edition of Quick Trivia with Mike. It's that weekly game show right here on ECTV, channel 955, where we test your knowledge of facts. Some are a little bit more historical and obscure in nature. Some of them are very contemporary and very topical. Hopefully you're having a lot of fun with it. I know we are. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and spending the next half hour with us right here on Quick Trivia with Mike. I am your host and the quiz master, Mike Brever. As you know, the show begins with giving you the answers to 3 questions that we posed last week. We then give you 3 new questions for the coming week. We see if you can enter the winner circle, just like some of our more well-known names from past shows. You know, last week we had our special 1-year anniversary edition. And I had my executive producer, Laura Wengler, and my producer, Scott McFerrin, and my artistic director, Cooper Ledvin up. They all joined me on set, but today we're back to the regular format. Let's get right into it, shall we? Let's take a look at the questions from last week and see if we can determine who the winner is. You know, last week we began by giving you one of our very famous What Am I's. This was a throwback to the early days of Quick Trivia with Mike. You look at a photo and you tell me what it is. It's kind of a medieval looking torture device, if you will, but it's not. It's actually a kitchen appliance. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a clue. What you are really looking at is a very basic meat tenderizer. You'll notice that it's a wheel with large spikes on it and a handle. You'd use the handle to push the wheel back and forth on a steak or a roast or something like that, and it would, in fact, tenderize the meat by severing the tendons and the muscles and things like that in the meat. Made it a much more palatable dinner for the family, and it was used at a time before we had all the modern conveniences that we have today. But again, a meat tenderizer from the early days of kitchens, right here on ECTV. We also talked a little bit about the fact that March is Women's History Month. We talked about a very famous personality of stage and screen, Helen Hayes. Actually born Helen Hayes MacArthur, nee Brown. She was born on October 10th, 1900 and passed away on March 17th, 1993. Her career on stage and screen spanned 80 years. She was often called the First Lady of the American Theater. She had also won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and in 1988 she was awarded the National Medal of the Arts. A renowned and beloved actress on stage and screen in contemporary entertainment history. I asked you, though, in addition to the very prestigious Presidential Medal of Freedom, the National Medal of the Arts, I asked you specifically, in 1977, Helen Hayes earned a Grammy Award. She also was the very first woman to earn the coveted EGOT, the EGOT Award. That took place in 1977 as well. I asked you, what is an EGOT? Well, an EGOT is an acronym for an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. The Grand Slam of entertainment, if you will. If you're in golf, you know it's going to be the Masters and the British Open and United States Open and the PGA. Tennis has the Australian, the French, Wimbledon, and United States Open. Well, entertainment has a Grand Slam as well. The Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, and the Tony. commonly called an EGOT, and Helen Hayes completed the sweep of the 4 very famous awards in 1977 when she earned her Grammy. Helen Hayes, the first woman of American theater. That was the answer to question number 2. What is an EGOT that she won? Our third question from last week talked a little bit more about older history in the United States. I specifically mentioned the 10 oldest churches in the United States. The Old Indian Meeting House in Mashpee, Massachusetts, the St. Luke's Church in Ben's Church, Virginia, the Third Haven Meeting House, Talbot County, Maryland, Old Ship Church in Hingham, Massachusetts, St. Mary's Whitechapel in Lancaster, Virginia, Old Trinity Church in Church Creek, Maryland, Jamestown Church, as you would imagine, in Jamestown, Virginia, San Esteban del Rey Mission Church in Acamo Pueblo, New Mexico, the San Miguel Mission in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the Cathedral of San Juan Bautista in San Juan, Puerto Rico. In terms of dates, the oldest of them was built in 1521. The newest was built in 1684. In theory, the 10 oldest churches in the United States, most of them are still in use, either as an actual meeting hall for religious purposes or as a museum or some other contemporary use. But remarkably, most of them are still in service. I pointed out to you, however, that in spite of the fact that they are labeled as the 10 oldest churches in America, there is a church that's older. I asked you, what is the church that is older than the Cathedral of San Juan Bautista, which was built in 1521, and where is that church located? The answer? The St. Joan of Arc Chapel, right here in Milwaukee, the oldest church in America. How is that possible? Well, first of all, it's located on the Marquette campus, downtown Milwaukee. It's nestled in the center of the campus, really not accessible by any streets. You got to get out of your car, walk to the middle of campus, just a short walk. Beautiful edifice, wonderful place of worship. You would really enjoy it. How is it possible that a church in Milwaukee is the oldest church in America? Well, it was built in 1420 in the village of Chase in the Rhone Valley, southeast of Lyon, France, where it served the community for centuries before falling into disrepair. In 1920, architect and historian Jacques Huel stumbled upon the chapel and made drawings, measured its dimensions, photographed it, and numbered each and every one of the stones. He wrote that it was obviously unique in its genre. When Gertrude Hill Gavin, daughter of an American railroad magnate and devotee of St. Joan of Arc, learned of the chapel, she actually purchased it, dismantled it stone by stone, and had it shipped to her property on Long Island, where a few years earlier she had erected a French Renaissance chateau, also purchased and shipped from France. Soon after, by the way, France enacted a new law banning the export of treasures like that chateau and the St. Joan of Arc chapel. It resided on Long Island for many, many, many years. And then it came into the possession of, Mark Reutemann. Gavin sold the chateau and chapel to Mark Reutemann in 1962. Reutemann was in fact president of J.I. Case until 1960. Turns out that he acquired the chapel, and he ended up donating it to Marquette. Once again, it was disassembled brick by brick, sent to Marquette, and reassembled, because Marquette graciously accepted, in the guise of the Reverend Edward J. O'Donnell, who was president of Marquette at the time. So there you have it. The St. Joan of Arc Chapel, built in the 1400s, now resides in the city of Milwaukee on the Marquette campus, and as such, kind of a trick question, is in fact the oldest church in America. Now, you all know that you have a chance to win Quick Trivia with Mike and get your photo on Channel 955 for an entire week by getting the most questions correct when you supply your answers. However, if 2 or more of you have the same number of questions correct, we have a tiebreaker. The bumper music at the beginning of the show, replicated at the end of the show, is the tiebreaker. Identify that music, and that is the tiebreaker if 2 or more of you have the same number of questions correct. This past week, the bumper music was Je t'aime, moi non plus. French song, keeping in the theme of the St. Joan of Arc Chapel, which came from France. Translated from the French, Je t'aime, moi non plus, means love, I don't care. It was written and recorded by Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg. So there you have it. That was our bumper music for the week. As it just so happens, only one person got the bumper music correct, and that was returning champion Kelvin Schrader. Kelvin did not get all of the questions correct. In fact, no one did for the week. But he got the most questions correct and, in fact, did identify the tiebreaker. The question that gave people the most trouble, of course, was the oldest chapel in America. So there you have it. Those are the answers to last week's questions. Our returning champion for the week, Kelvin Schrader. Now, it's time for our brief intermission. Time for you to go get yourself a cup of coffee, maybe a donut. Come on back, settle in for the second half of the show when we pose 3 new questions for you, and we'll provide the answers to those next week. So go get that cup of coffee and come on back.
The Florida Everglades and Old Milwaukee both mean something great to these guys. The Everglades means airboating, as close as you can get to flying without leaving the ground. And Old Milwaukee means a great beer. Cold, crisp Old Milwaukee beer and smooth, golden Old Milwaukee Light.
There's nothing like the flavor of a special place in Old Milwaukee beer.
Old Milwaukee and Old Milwaukee Light.
Hey guys, it doesn't get any better than this.
Welcome back to the second half of our show. You know, we've already given you the 3 answers to last week's questions, and we identified Kelvin Schrader as our winner for the week. It is now time to give you our 3 new questions and lots of topical issues that we can delve into today. First, with the new CDC guidelines and the relaxing of some issues with the coronavirus, more and more children are returning to school on a weekly basis. You know, my wife is a first grade school teacher in South Milwaukee. For a good portion of the year, up until the second semester, she taught virtually. She would have to go on the internet, and her children would attend class through Zoom. Well, with the second semester, South Milwaukee schools returned to in-person education, and my wife was one of them. More and more schools are doing that all the time now, which means that more and more school buses have returned to the streets. I thought it might be fun to take a look at school buses and just learn a little bit more about them. I know there's some really interesting questions that we can pose about them. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, school buses statistically are the safest type of road vehicle. On average, only 5 fatalities involve school-aged children on a school bus each year. Statistically, a school bus is 70 times safer than riding to school by car. Interestingly enough, if there are fatalities involving a school bus, it's more frequently passengers of another vehicle that was in an accident with a school bus than passengers of the school bus. Being a passenger on a school bus is an extremely safe mode of transportation. Since the initial development of consistent school bus standards in 1939, many of the ensuing changes to school buses over the past 8 decades have been safety related, particularly in response to more stringent regulations adopted by state and federal governments. Ever since the adoption of yellow as a standard color in 1939, school buses deliberately integrate the concept of being conspicuous into their design. They want people to see a school bus from as far away as possible. When making student drop-offs or pickups, traffic law gives school buses priority over all other vehicles. In order to stop traffic, they are equipped with flashing lights and a stop sign. As a consequence of their size, school buses have a number of blind spots for the driver around the outside of the vehicle, which can endanger passengers disembarking or pedestrians standing or walking nearby. To address this particular safety challenge, a key point of school bus design is focused on exterior visibility, improving the design of bus windows, mirrors, and the windshield to optimize visibility for the driver. In the case of a collision, the structure of a school bus is designed with an integral roll cage with as few pieces as possible that compose the carriage of the bus. A school bus carries a large number of student passengers. A school bus is designed with several emergency exits to facilitate fast egress, which is an engineer's way of saying getting out of the place as quick as possible. An ingress gets you in, and egress gets you out. An interesting facet of school buses, though, is something that you have seen every single day and never knew the logic or the rationale for. School buses tend to have black lines along the side of the school bus going from the beginning to the back. Those really are not just cosmetic. There is a reason for those black lines on a school bus. Why? Why does a school bus have black lines on its side? That, my friends, is question number 1 for this week's Quick Trivia with Mike. Question number 2. As you know, March is Women's History Month. We're going to take a little bit of look at women's history and the celebration of Women's History Month over the years. February 28, 1909 marked the very first Women's History Day, and it was in New York City. It commemorated the 1-year anniversary of the garment workers' strikes, when 15,000 women marched through Lower Manhattan. From 1909 to 1910, immigrant women who worked in garment factories held a strike to protest their working conditions. And so the very first Women's Day in 1909 was set to commemorate that strike. The day became Women's History Week in 1978. An education task force in Sonoma County, California, kicked off Women's History Week on March 8th, International Women's Day. In 1987, Women's History Week became Women's History Month. Women's organizations, including the National Women's History Alliance, campaigned to recognize Women's History Week, and in 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared the week of March 8th Women's History Week. Ronald Reagan actually declared Women's History Month, the month of March, in 1987. Of course, Congress had been lobbied to do that as well. Since 1995, every president has issued a proclamation declaring March Women's History Month, usually with a statement about its importance. Unbeknownst to most of us, every Women's History Month has a theme. In 2020, just last year, the theme was Valiant Women of the Vote. In 2021, this year, Women's History Month theme is Valiant Women of the Vote, refusing to be silenced. Wyoming Territory was actually the first place to grant women the right to vote. They did so in 1869. It took a long time for the rest of the country to become as progressive as a territory. Wyoming actually also elected the first female governor, Nellie Taylor Ross, as way back as 1924. Wyoming, God bless them. A lot of people think the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. It did, but it only gave some women the right to vote. As we all know, because of Jim Crow laws and other types of things that were prevalent at the time, there were many areas that did not provide the right to vote to Native American women, Black women, Asian American women, and Latinx women. It wasn't until 1924, 4 years later, that Native women born in the United States were granted citizenship, allowing them to vote. Did you know that today 24% of Congress is made up of women? Today more women earn college degrees, now that's bachelor degrees. More women earn bachelor's degrees than men. In fact, 58% of the bachelor's degrees awarded today are to female recipients. Of course, the gender pay gap still exists. 82 cents on the dollar for every woman versus men. 14.4% of active duty military members are women today. Aretha Franklin was the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I wish it would have been sooner than Aretha Franklin when she was inducted in 1987. But if there had to be a first, I'll tell you the Queen of Soul is about as good as it gets. Now, in keeping with March being Women's History Month, you know, the census of the United States is broken up by age categories. You know, there's 18 to 45 and 45 to 54 and 54 with it. Well, new age categories also start at age 85. Senior citizens. Senior citizens actually start much younger. But 85 and up clearly focuses on senior citizens. My question to you, according to the 2010 census, are there more women older than men? Are there more women than men? Let me phrase that right. I got to think this through. Are there more women than men over the age of 85, according to the 2010 census? I'm going to give you three options. You can guess that it's equal. There's the same number of men as women, age 85 and older. The number of women compared to men is double. Or the number of women compared to men is triple. Again, this is according to the 2010 census, and it is United States citizens, obviously, because it's the census. Age 85 and up. Are women in number equal to men, double to men, or triple to men in their numbers? That, my friends, is question number 2. Question number 3. You are watching this on Friday, March 19th. I am taping this on Wednesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. One final question of the month for Irish trivia. One of my favorite movies, The Quiet Man, starring John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, and of course directed by the incomparable John Ford. One of the few Hollywood films in which Gaelic, the native language of Ireland, is actually spoken. A lot of ironies about the particular movie. Charles B. Fitzsimmons, who played Hugh Forbes, and James O'Hara, who played Father Paul, were the real-life brothers of Maureen O'Hara, who played Mary Kate Danaher. Republic Pictures actually produced it. John Ford, of course, was the producer, but he did it through Republic Pictures. They tended to specialize in low-budget westerns, comedies, and war pictures. You know, a lot of the World War II John Wayne movies were Republic, and his early westerns of the 30s were Republic Pictures as well. So The Quiet Man was a real departure for John Ford when he did the movie. It was the company's first and only film to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Picture. So clearly, it was a great departure for Republic Pictures, and they made a wonderful decision. When Sean and Mary Kate take their wagon into town, now of course Sean is played by John Wayne and Mary Kate is played by Maureen O'Hara. When they take their wagon into town one day, a store bearing the name Emily O'Connor can be seen in the background. This is actually a craft store and is in business to this day. If you ever take a trip of Ireland, I encourage you to go ahead and do some of the sightseeing related to The Quiet Man. Cohan's Pub in the film was actually a grocery store in County Mayo, Ireland. It later became a souvenir shop and was recently turned into a genuine Irish pub. It was officially opened on September 17, 2008. By Tara McGowran, the daughter of Jack McGowran, who played Ignatius Feeney in the movie. It is alleged that when Maureen O'Hara passed away in 2015, she did so listening to Victor Young's score of The Quiet Man. Victor McLaglen, another famous character in the film, was 64 and in poor health at the time of the filming. So his fight with John Wayne had to be filmed very carefully because of his poor health. The white-haired, frail Dan Tobin, who gets up from his deathbed and runs to see the fight, is actually John Ford's older brother, Francis Ford. Francis was a silent film actor and director in his own right. Unfortunately, he died 2 years after the filming of The Quiet Man. John Wayne said that the role of Sean Thornton, now considered one of his best, was difficult for him. He says that for 9 weeks he was just playing straight man to those wonderful characters, and that was extremely hard. And if you've ever seen the movie, you know exactly what he's talking about. A lot of those characters are just immortal in their portrayals. It's just fabulous. Maureen O'Hara, as you now know, claims that it was her favorite film. John Wayne actually directed the horse racing sequence because John Ford was ill at the time of that filming. Believe it or not, John Ford originally read the story that forms the basis of The Quiet Man in 1933 and purchased the rights for $10. For $10, he purchased the rights to The Quiet Man. The author, Maurice Walsh, later received another $6,000 in payment for the rights when the film was actually made. Several actors were brought in for Dublin's Abbey Players to serve in scenes. Maureen O'Hara and Barry Fitzgerald actually started their careers at the Abbey Players. John Ford actually won an unprecedented, at the time, 4th Best Director Academy Award. He'd won previously for The Informer, The Grapes of Wrath, and How Green Was My Valley. We had questions in the past about Bing Crosby here on Quick Trivia. You may be surprised to learn that Bing Crosby regretted not being cast as Sean Thornton. He really wanted to get in on the film. Little bit of trivia about the film, though, which comprises question number 3. When Sean Thornton and Mary Kate O'Danaher get married, John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, the last line of the wedding toast was censored. It was censored by Republic Pictures. Why? Why was the last line of the wedding toast censored? What we see now in the wedding toast is, may their days be long and full of happiness. May their children be many and full of health. And that's the end of the toast. There actually was another line that succeeded the toast. What was that line, and why was it dropped? That, my friends, is question number 3. There you have it. Those are our 3 questions for Quick Trivia with Mike. You know how to win by now. You can get your answers to me by noon on Monday by email at mbrever@eastcastleplace.com. You can call me on my desk phone at 963-8425. You can also write your answers down on a sheet of paper, put them in my mailbox behind the concierge desk. Or you can leave them on the little conference table in my office. I'll guarantee you, my office is a little bit warm right now because we're adjusting seasonally the temperature of the buildings. And my office is one of those that's betwixt and between. There's nothing in my office worth stealing except someone else's answers to Quick Trivia with Mike. But feel free to stop by and give me your answers that way. There you have it. If 2 or more of you get the same number of questions correct, identify the bumper music that begins and ends this show. And that is the tiebreaker. Maybe you will be in the winner's circle next week, like Kelvin Schrader this week. Get your answers in. That's our show for this week. I'd like to thank, as always, the president of ECTV, Tyler Gudex, my executive producer, Laura Wengler, my producer and cameraman, Scott McFerrin, and as always, the incomparable artistic director, Cooper Ledvina. You saw them all here last week on our 1-year anniversary show. Now you know some of the faces behind the camera. As always, I am your host and the quizmaster, Mike Brever. I really want to thank you for inviting me into your home for this last half hour. I hope you had a lot of fun. I did. As always, I ask you to please be safe, be smart, and be patient. You know, we've opened up the treasure chest on Fridays. We have the store on the 2nd floor open again now. The dining room has opened with spaced seating so that we can keep people safe. Everyone here, the residents, have all had the 2 vaccines now. Most of the staff have had it as well. We are slowly reopening. You'll be in Lindsay Hall pretty quick for programs and things like that. So please, be safe and be smart and be patient. We're all going to be together again very soon to enjoy that wonderful East Castle Place hospitality. So until next week, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I'll see you next week.
The taste of love is sweet when hearts like ours meet. I felt for you like a child. Oh,